This is the Ohio Farm Bureau podcast. Thanks for watching and listening. I'm Ty Higgins. Going back almost 100 years, the Farm Bill has become an integral part in keeping America's food system strong and reliable. Today, agriculture's role in providing food security and, in turn, national security to the U.S. is more important than ever. And now, work on the next Farm Bill has started during a period of volatility on every front, political, economic, and beyond. To find out more about the current Farm Bill and the status of the legislation being worked on in Washington today, we visit with Ryan Yates, Managing Director of Government Affairs with American Farm Bureau. Ryan, great to see you. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Good morning.
We have a mix of people that are involved in agriculture and not. For those that may not be familiar with the Farm Bill, give us an overview.
Well, the Farm Bill, the history of the Farm Bill goes back, like you say, close to 100 years. And really, the history of the Farm Bill largely tracks the history of food production in this country. And as food production and technology innovation, and frankly, just the needs of American producers and consumers has changed and evolved, so has the Farm Bill in Washington. So we are currently up for renewal for a new Farm Bill for 2023. But going back, Washington has produced 18 farm bills since the 1930s, like I said, with the 2018 Farm Bill set to expire September 30th of this year. So we all eyes are on what will be the 23 Farm Bill.
You mentioned that deadline. It is fast approaching, September 30th. What does the Farm Bill process look like as far as a Farm Bureau standpoint? When do you start getting those priority issues taking shape and deliver those messages to the Hill?
Well, and the uniqueness of Farm Bureau as an institution, as a federation, we are the largest general ag organization in the country, frankly, in the world. But when it comes to farm policy, representing every aspect of agriculture and every producer across the country, the Farm Bill means something to everybody. It's a little bit different from region to region, and that's why our responsibility to lean on our states, to lean on our county and state farm bureaus, to ask those tough questions. What's important to you? What do you need? What does this Farm Bureau or Farm Bill need to look like when Congress begins writing? And so we started this process of looking at the 18 Farm Bill, looking at what are the changes that may be appropriate. As we all know, the last 3-4 years have been very interesting across the ecosystem in agriculture, and so certainly the time to look at these farm policies is now. So we started a process about 18 months ago, and we brought in every state farm bureau in Puerto Rico in a Farm Bill working group to really just vet the titles, title by title, looking at the issues to come up with a comprehensive set of priorities that would lead our efforts to take to Congress. And so that's where we're at now. And, with our partners across all the commodity groups and agriculture groups, I think other folks are doing the same thing. And the good news now is we're coming out of a period of time where Congress is listening. And that is a wonderful thing to at least tell the world that Congress has been listening. They're actively listening to agriculture. They're listening to farmers and ranchers across the country. And both the House and the Senate Ag committees have been engaged in listening sessions, hearings in every corner of rural America for the last year. And those listening sessions they're still ongoing. We still have a handful that have been scheduled, but I think the committees are going to be transitioning from a listening mode to a writing mode in the very near future. As you mentioned, that deadline is September 30th. So these are not small. It's not a small bill. There's a lot to write, and so we are encouraged that Congress has the information it needs to ultimately start crafting a good bill.
You mentioned how wide-ranging these issues can be. When you look at the entire U.S. agriculture scene, it varies greatly from coast to coast, but it seems like each time you have some issues that kind of bubble up to the top. What are they this go around for this Farm Bill?
Well, I think one of the biggest issues when we're looking at the Farm Bill is, and I say the Farm Bill, we all call it a Farm Bill, but it really is a food and Farm Bill. The Farm Bill, as I mentioned earlier, it's evolved over time, and there have been the approaches to getting a Farm Bill done. We bring in a variety of different stakeholders and partners in food and agriculture. So in addition to farm programs and agricultural programs. One of the largest portions of or titles of the Farm Bill is the nutrition title. And so roughly 80% of the Farm Bill are nutrition programs that fall in that nutrition title of the Farm Bill. And certainly the costs of the nutrition title have continued to grow, as well as other titles of the Farm Bill. So in the past, we've looked at I'd say budgets in a way that you're talking about billions of dollars. For the 23 Farm Bill, we're looking at well over $1 trillion over 10 years is the outlay for this Farm Bill. And so cost containment, I think, as we're looking at the current Congress, there are a lot of folks that fiscal conservative types that are going to be looking with a greater deal of scrutiny at how these programs are funded and the outlays for the programs. And that cost containment may be more important to certain members of Congress than others, but that will be a sticking point. Is just the scale, the actual cost to the taxpayer for the 23 Farm Bill. And so that is definitely something that all eyes will be on in terms of a potential point of contention, if you will. I think the other issues that we're looking at, again, everything has changed over the last several years. And ultimately, the way we look at this Farm Bill, these are risk management tools. For farmers and ranchers, we've got, crop insurance is a core tenet of the Farm Bill, and commodity programs as well. But even on the nutrition side, this is a safety net for consumers, and the folks that aren't doing so well. And so this is a safety net for a lot of Americans that need a handout so that they can feed their families. And so when we're looking at this broadly, the safety net that is the Food and Farm Bill, again, how those dollars are allocated, are going to be viewed upon by lawmakers very differently. And so I think that really showcases why we've developed a Farm Bill this way, and Congress has attached nutrition and farm programs together so that we don't really have a piece of legislation that can be regional in nature or can be partisan in nature. The Farm Bill serves all constituents, urban, rural alike, southeast to the Midwest, to the Northeast, to the West. So the Farm Bill programs affect every American across the country. And so I think that's one of the selling points is for pulling together votes on a Farm Bill. The Farm Bill matters to all Americans. So that's something that when we're advocating for this bill, we can walk into urban offices, we can walk into rural offices and talk about how the Farm Bill helps Americans. And I think that's important, especially in a time where we've seen excessive partisanship in Washington. The good news is leaders in Washington are looking at a Farm Bill in a bipartisan way. And I think that's helpful, especially with the margins that we have in Congress today. They're tight margins, and we can't approach passing a Farm Bill in a partisan fashion. It has to be bipartisan. And so I think that's why the continued focus on maintaining a comprehensive bill is so important to getting this thing done.
As if the political challenges weren't enough, about half of lawmakers in Washington, when you walk into their office and talk to the Farm Bill, might be hearing about a Farm Bill for the first time. What type of challenges does that bring as far as the education component of the Farm Bill is concerned?
Well, and that's a fun fact there. I think when we counted it up, I think it's about 260 members of Congress from both the House and the Senate are currently serving in Congress that were not here in 2018. And so what does that mean? That means we have a lot of folks that have never had to take a vote on a Farm Bill. Frankly, there are a lot of legislators that may not know what even goes in a Farm Bill, why it's important. And so that level of, I'd say, shoe leather work, that education work that has to take place and has been ongoing is pretty significant. I'd say this is kind of the biggest change. The turnover in Washington has been so significant. And so that sometimes that's a good thing. It creates opportunities. Sometimes members of Congress, once they vote a certain way, it's hard to change their vote, despite putting facts on the table. And so we have a tremendous opportunity to educate these 260 newer members of Congress to help them better understand, why the Farm Bill is important. We can talk about food security. We can talk about jobs, conservation, those risk management tools I talked about. And frankly, at the end of the day, we can talk about addressing hunger. And I think when you look at those primary tenets of what we're advocating for, it's hard to find a member of Congress that says, I just am not interested in jobs today. Sorry, guys. I'm not interested in food security or hunger. No, that's not something that most members of Congress are willing to say. So helping them understand how the Farm Bill works to address those issues in a positive way, in a cost-effective way, I think is very beneficial for ultimately what we're trying to accomplish.
Depending on the day and who the media talks to, the Farm Bill is on track to get done in time. It'll get kicked down the road for a couple of weeks or maybe for the rest of the year. What are the chances looking like of getting this passed by that September 30th deadline? And what happens if that doesn't happen?
Well, 20 years in Washington, one thing that I've learned is Congress loves a deadline, and they work well under pressure. So yes, while there is a September 30th deadline, and we continue to keep feet to the fire of Congress, we'd love for them to get that bill done by September 30th. But I also wasn't born yesterday. I know that legislating can be hard. So the good news is we have some options. The four corners of the ag committees have continued to maintain steadfast support for getting a bill done this year. If this bill slips past the deadline, I'm not ultimately worried about it. I think Congress, they know what they need to do. They know how to get it done. And the other thing Congress is good at is writing short-term extensions. And so I'm not going to put a whole lot of weight on whether or not this is done September 30th or October 15th or October 30th. It has to get done this year, though. We continue to maintain strong pressure on Congress to get this thing done. There's so much at stake. And frankly, Congress was elected to do a job. And we're going to remind them that they need to do that job for the American people.
What can members of Ohio Farm Bureau and American Farm Bureau do to help get a more favorable farm bill across the finish line?
Well, look, I think first and foremost, you don't have to be in Washington to be an effective lobbyist. Citizen lobbying is huge, and that's what we do well at Farm Bureau. Our county farm bureaus and state farm bureaus engage in a way that is so effective. And so the best news is it's August recess. The best time in Washington is when legislators leave. They go home. So in Ohio, you have legislators at home that are doing town halls, that are visiting their constituents. Find an opportunity to meet with them and say, listen, Farm Bill is important to us in Ohio. We need you to pass a Farm Bill. That's a great message to take home to those legislators while they're home campaigning and visiting and learning about their districts and their state. I think the other thing that's important to recognize is while talking to legislators is important, talking to communities, talking to people that your social groups, folks that in your communities that you visit with at church, your community groups, your business groups. There are a lot of Americans, in the public opinion polling that we've done shows us that not many Americans understand or even know what a farm bill is. And so I think talking about the Farm Bill in those community circles is equally important, so that people know what's at stake, so that they know when they hear this idea of a Farm Bill, they're going to know a little bit more about it and why it's important. And hearing directly from farmers and ranchers in local communities, I think, is important. So again, not only talking to your legislators and their staff, but again, building attention, building some momentum across political circles, across community circles, I think is equally important, so that all Americans can truly understand why it's so important for Congress to get this done right.
Get the latest updates on the Farm Bill at American Farm Bureau's website at fb.org. Ryan Yates, Managing Director of Government Affairs with American Farm Bureau. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Hey, thanks so much.
We heard what farmers and Farm Bureau wants out of the Farm Bill, but what do consumers think about farm legislation? We'll talk about that coming up after this on the Ohio Farm Bureau podcast.
Find out how Nationwide Agribusiness can help you grow your business. Get to know the people with the experience and knowledge to help you. Whether you are looking to protect your farm or ranch from the ground up, or need someone who understands your changing commercial ag needs. Find out how to better manage the risks of your ag business, or how quickly you can get back to business. Learn how you can protect your next with Nationwide on your side.
Here in our state, there's an energy at work, a drive to help people live healthier lives with confidence. But it can't be done alone. That's why our healthcare, business, and community leaders have joined together to help people here feel more empowered by their healthcare, leading to improved long-term health and savings. A health plan for small businesses in the agricultural industry was created by the Ohio Farm Bureau Federation. It provides members the tools, resources, and financial protection to feel confident in their healthcare decisions. By sharing responsibilities, we help build healthier employees and communities, driving down costs, connecting members digitally to Anthem's diverse network of local resources, participating in health literacy, easing administrative burdens. Joining the plan means you're part of making healthcare work better, giving people the confidence to make anything possible. To learn more about how the plan can work for your business, visit our website or call your broker or Anthem sales representative.
Welcome back to the Ohio Farm Bureau podcast. I'm Ty Higgins. We just heard what is important to farmers when it comes to a new farm bill and what American Farm Bureau is sharing with lawmakers about it in Washington. But what do consumers think when it comes to the legislation? Almost 3/4 of Americans say that not reauthorizing the farm bill this year would have a significant impact on the country, according to a new poll from the American Farm Bureau Federation. Carrie Barbick, Director of Communications with AFBF, joins us. Carrie, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
So let's lay the groundwork. Tell us about this survey and the thought behind putting it together.
Yeah, absolutely. So we, from time to time, run surveys like this just to gauge sentiment and help us to understand where folks are on any particular issue. So rolling into a farm bill year and knowing how important that is for farmers and ranchers and for the country as a whole, we wanted to get a good understanding of where folks are, where their understanding is. We know more and more folks are removed from the farm, so we expected that we'd have a little bit of a learning gap there with folks. So we just wanted to have a better understanding of where they were, how much they had heard about the farm bill, and what they thought about different aspects of the farm bill and how it impacts their lives.
Before you got into talking about the farm bill with consumers, you asked them about trust of what farmers do day in and day out. What does that consumer trust look like today?
Yeah, absolutely. So over the course of these surveys, we've been asking folks, tracking pretty regularly over the last several years, how much they trust farmers and ranchers, what that level of trust looks like. And it's consistently high, which is really encouraging to see. Folks consistently say that they trust farmers and ranchers. And this most recent survey, that looked like about 9 in 10 adults saying that they trust farmers and ranchers. So we know that it's important to have that support, and we like to tie that back to the importance of farmers and ranchers sharing their story more broadly. That's something we like to talk about, and it just really reinforces that the average consumer is eager to hear from farmers and ranchers about what they're doing every day.
There are so many variables to America's food system. You and I know that. Consumers go to the grocery store and all of a sudden they have dinner right there waiting for them, but there are so many complexities behind the scenes. What is the biggest concern about America's food system today as far as the consumer standpoint is concerned?
Yeah, absolutely. So we asked folks to rank some top issues that we're seeing right now. And I don't think it'll surprise you, but the top concern for folks is food price inflation. We've seen prices at the grocery store shift dramatically over the last couple of years. And we know comparatively, we still have an affordable food supply when we look at other parts of the world for sure. But from what we're accustomed to seeing, it's a lot higher. It's more of a pressure point for folks. And I mean, even recently with my own grocery shopping, I've been comparing prices from store to store. And that's something that I've not really had to do much of in recent years. So it's definitely a check for folks. And we saw 86% of folks saying that that's their top concern right now, followed closely by concerns around food insecurity, which is not surprising when you're seeing that high cost of food that folks are concerned about, that there's also that concern about food insecurity as well.
Yeah, along those same lines, I don't think that you and I have mentioned that food security is national security more than we have over the last 2 or 3 years. You had the COVID pandemic, which showed us the strains that American food system goes through when those types of things happen. The war in Ukraine really emphasized what was happening in that part of the world, and how important keeping that food system moving forward was here in the U.S. And now we're hearing about outside interest in adversary countries buying up farmland in the U.S. And we're again saying that food security equals national security. How much is that resonating with the average consumer these days?
Well, I think that context that you mentioned is really key there. So just that phrase, food security is national security by itself, that we've seen in the past that doesn't always resonate with folks. But when you place it in the context of global events, and that's what we did with this survey, we placed it in the context of how the war in Ukraine has affected global food supply, how it's affected food prices beyond those borders there. Then when you place it in that context, then we really see a strong support for folks saying that, yes, the U.S. should place a strong emphasis on ensuring that we have a safe and abundant food supply. And we saw 84% of folks agreeing with that sentiment when placed in the context of global events.
As we talked about earlier in the podcast, almost half of lawmakers in Washington have never even worked on a farm bill. So the education component for lawmakers is key. But how difficult was it to put together a survey when the consumer maybe doesn't know as much as you and I do about the farm bill? Less than 2% of our population involved in agriculture. Were there any challenges with this survey, or how did you go about making sure the consumer knew a little bit more before they answered the questions?
Yeah, we definitely approached this a little differently than we do other surveys, just from what you mentioned there in framing and asking folks about their support of the farm bill. We didn't want to just straight up say, like, or ask, do you support a farm bill, without giving them some context there. And we also wanted to ask folks like how that would tie to their support of their members of Congress, because there's a difference between saying you generally support something versus like putting that like where your vote is as well. So knowing that only 71%, I believe, is what we saw of folks who said they hadn't heard, read, or seen much about a farm bill. And of that 71%, 42% hadn't heard, read, or seen anything at all. We wanted to give them some context. So when we asked that question of how likely are you to support your member of Congress if they voted to reauthorize a farm bill, we gave them a basic statement of, as you may know, the farm bill includes support for risk management programs for farmers and ranchers. It includes nutrition programs for families facing hunger, and it includes conservation programs. So we gave them that broad statement of what the farm bill does. And then when placed in that context, we saw over half of folks, about 57%, say that they'd be more likely to support their member of Congress if they voted to reauthorize a farm bill. So really, yeah, I think that learning curve is a challenge, but we found that even just giving the basic explanation of what's in the farm bill and why it matters, that really had an impact with folks.
Once you did that, once you got into the weeds a little bit, what parts of the farm bill really hit home as these consumers took the survey?
Yeah, I'd say the top priorities for folks were really those risk management tools, especially like when we're looking at emphasizing the importance of keeping our food supply secure. That resonated with folks when we talk about how important it is to manage risk and how that's part of keeping food on our tables. That resonated with folks, as well as the importance of nutrition programs. Like we talked a lot about the importance of a unified farm bill. We referenced this as like a food and farm bill, and how farmers are part of that story in growing the food that goes into those nutrition programs that's supporting so many families who are facing hunger, and more so in like challenging times with this economy. So we found that those were top items that resonated with folks. But really, when we looked across the farm bill at like conservation programs, crop insurance, and ag research, like all of those like resonated with folks as important priorities. But really, that the risk management piece and the nutrition piece that really came out on top for most folks surveyed.
The Farm Bill talks are ramping up in Washington. The deadline is the end of September to get one passed, unless we decide to extend that a little bit through the end of the year, as some have mentioned in Washington. How do you and your colleagues there at AFBF, both on the communications front and on the policy front, plan on using this information from the survey?
Yeah, this has been really helpful for us in just how we talk about the Farm Bill. So we started early on this year doing a more like basic engagement approach where we want folks to understand what's in the Farm Bill. We have a series of market intel pieces that our economist team has put together explaining various aspects of the Farm Bill. Those can all be found on our Farm Bill page at fb.org. And then we've also wanted to look at the impact of the Farm Bill. So we've shared like broad numbers about the impact that the ag economy has on jobs, how agriculture is supporting 46 million jobs across the food and agriculture sector, and how the Farm Bill plays an important role in continuing that, talking about conservation programs and the impact that those conservation programs have, where farmers and ranchers are able to set aside 140 million acres across the country, size of roughly New York and California combined. So really like sharing like those like top level points of the broad impact that the Farm Bill has across the country has been key to how we're talking about Farm Bill. And then that other key component we talked about earlier is the farmer and rancher story. And so we're really looking to elevate those stories and have like farmers and ranchers talking directly about how the Farm Bill helps them in running their farm and ranch, how it helps them keep that food supply safe, sustainable, abundant. That's really a key component that we're looking to share with lawmakers and with the public in general.
Whether you're a consumer wanting to know more about the Farm Bill or a farmer wanting to know what American Farm Bureau and Ohio Farm Bureau are doing on your behalf, you can visit that Farm Bill page at fb.org that Carrie mentioned, and of course, ohiofarmbureau.org, another resource for Farm Bill information. Carrie Barbick, Director of Communications for American Farm Bureau, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ty.